10 years, or what's commonly referred to as a decade, is a long time if you really think about it. Considering it as 522 weeks, 3,652 days, 87,658 hours, 5,259,492 minutes, or 315,569,520 seconds helps give it perspective. A lot can happen in such a period, and the very nature of 10 itself symbolizes the completion of a cycle. This cycle began on the fateful day of April 26, 2013. I'm sure it was as mundane a day as any other, but little did I know it was a pivotal moment in my life. I pulled up my browser and went to YouTube. I've been infatuated by it ever since 2006, and I practically grew up on it making content. However, this was different. At the time, I was studying fine arts at university. Graduation was on the horizon, so I began compiling my portfolio in hopes to find a job. I knew social media could be leveraged for this purpose, and that's actually why I made this channel. I wanted to share and showcase my art primarily through time-lapse videos. Unfortunately, the quality just wasn't there, and I had virtually no direction with what I was doing here or with my life in general. There is a remaining video from that time though, the first one in my feed actually. Unbeknownst to me, it would foreshadow the next 10 years of my journey as SerpaDesign. This project is so nostalgic. The YouTube landscape was much different then. I was still, for lack of better words, very immature and just trying to find my place. However, this video was special. I made it as a gift for my girlfriend at the time, alongside the vivarium itself. I remember telling her that this is actually what I wanted to do. Sure, I'm working towards a degree and am skilled in my field, but I just want to make nature art. I have since I was quite young. I've kept animals for my entire life and have always strived to do better for them, which is why I learned to do this in the first place. It's one of the few things that's truly been consistent throughout my life. Even though I love it, I was often ridiculed and not taken seriously because of it. I can recall many instances of this. Regardless, I continued to quietly enjoy my hobby on the side, occasionally sharing it on YouTube. Trying to find a job within my field of study always felt the same. I don't know if it's what I said or how I looked, but I could always tell that I wasn't taken seriously. Looking back, I don't necessarily blame them, but it was discouraging nonetheless. I've always been a hard worker and was willing to give my all to whoever would give me an opportunity. I've dealt with depression for as long as I can remember, but this was a real low point in my life. I felt hopeless, didn't know what to do, and was becoming complacent with my situation. I just continued working underpaid jobs I wasn't passionate about, and occasionally made videos about animals. During that time, I also unfortunately lost Gunther and Olivia, which further added to everything, and I stopped pursuing this YouTube channel altogether. I spent those years trying to figure things out and made a lot of progress, but I still didn't know what to do with my life. I remember praying in a broken state for a door to be opened to me, something that I would know for certain was the correct path. Thereafter, for lack of better words, I felt compelled to make the second episode of How to Terrarium. It was something I began 2 years prior with the succulent terrarium. Ironically enough, that was another project that I made for my girlfriend. Anyway, I demonstrated how to make a closed tropical terrarium, uploaded the video, and stepped away for a few weeks. When I returned, I was greeted by 300 or so subscribers and 9,000 views. Historically, I'd get a view here or there, and some of the older videos gained a few thousand views by then, but I never saw growth like this. Then I recalled my request. A light bulb went off in me, and I had a deep conviction and knowing that this was my path forward. From there, I began uploading more regularly, leaning into the terrarium niche as I did. It was something I was passionate about, there was little content about it on YouTube at the time, and people seemed to be enjoying it. The channel's growth was steady, but not major. However, the direction of everything would change on the day I uploaded How to Terrarium episode 4. I just published the video and went to my girlfriend's house. I wanted to get her parents' blessing before I asked her to marry me. Understandably, they said they'd prefer if I had a stable, full-time job first. I went home discouraged until I looked at the video I uploaded 2 hours prior. It had 3,500 views in just 2 hours, which was my fastest growing video at the time. I said to myself, alright, this YouTube stuff is going to happen, so I'll get a quote-unquote stable job that doesn't require my degree since I can't find one in my field. 2 days later, I got the first one I could find in title insurance. Honestly, I hated it, but it paid enough for me to at least fill the criteria. Not long after, I proposed, and she said yes. Just 2 weeks later, I was at orientation for the new job. I remember sitting in the hotel after hours on my toaster of a laptop, uploading the 4,000 subscriber special. It was the first animal room tour. Until then, I hadn't really talked about my animals, which were my first love, so to speak. Luckily, the video did well and encouraged me to lean into that more. Over the following 6 months, I continued uploading almost every week. I focused mostly on terrariums still, but I began showing more about vivariums. In fact, the first full tutorial I did in that avenue was for Henry the crested gecko. He's been one of the primary mascots of the channel ever since. Despite my expectations, the channel still wasn't monetized. I don't know how I thought I'd make a living on YouTube otherwise, but I didn't do it until around 40,000 subscribers. I was guilty about it because I felt like I was disrespecting my audience with advertisements. Anyway, this all lined up perfectly with the second Animal Room tour. I was grinding pretty steadily from the beginning, but I really put things into overdrive at this point and haven't stopped since. I was putting in 40 hours a week at my job and the same amount of time or more on making videos after hours. I basically worked non-stop, getting only 4 to 5 hours of sleep each night. I was on a mission and perhaps convinced to a fault of what I had to do. I was determined. While on my breaks at work, I'd write scripts, respond to comments, and think about what I would do next. And just to be clear, I wasn't slacking at my job either. I still put my best foot forward, regardless of my heart not being there. Slowly but surely, I began doing more elaborate projects that encapsulate other skills I have. The plywood vivariums, for example. However, as I look back on videos from this time, I don't think I was pushing the boundaries just yet. Not until I reached 100,000 subscribers or so. Hitting this milestone was a very surreal experience. I saw a few other similar channels doing it at the time, but seeing it on my platform was a visual representation of what I knew to be true coming to fruition. I was far from making this a full-time living back then, but this is an important stage in the process for any content creator. Exploring more creative ideas, I made the no-opening terrarium, levitating mossarium, terrarium in an aquarium, the 180-gallon vivarium, and much more. I also did my first in-person collaboration around then, which ironically happened while on a business trip. I was in Philadelphia, which is not far from H2O Plants in New Jersey. I pulled up to Justin's place one evening, did a live build, and toured his facility. It was about mid-2018 by this point, and things were about to change. Till then, I had done everything out of my parents' basement. I'm thankful they put up with it for all of those years and allowed me to do it, but it was time to move on. Anyway, my fiance and I had been saving for years in hopes to buy our first house. Looking back, we had no business doing that, but we made it work. It was a really exciting time because I no longer had to deal with the restrictions of living with my parents. I was able to set up a new space more in line with my needs, while also learning a lot more about home renovation. I honestly don't know how I was still uploading consistently at that time. I remember being exhausted, but I kept going. The new animal room allowed me to heavily incorporate aquatics. I did a few aquariums on the channel by then, but the paludariums are what jump-started and developed the whole thing. Don't get me wrong, I love a good aquarium, but these allow for so much more creativity. Alongside this, I continued to push the boundaries, making things like the Klein bottle terrarium, ecospheres, and so on. Shortly after, I had my first visitor as well. Lucas Bretz of LRB Aquatics showed up and toured the animal room. It was a cool experience to see somebody else's perspective on what I was doing. Remember the girlfriend who I made the vivarium for back in 2013? Well, that's the same girl that I proposed to, and things finally came full circle with all of that, and we got married. Early on in our relationship, we built a terrarium together, and I made those other two for her. Since they've been a part of our story from the beginning, we decided to create a terrarium for our wedding's union ceremony, which we still have to this day. It was at this point in the journey that I finally fulfilled a lifelong dream of having my very own backyard pond. I wanted one for the longest time, and even more so once I got goldfish years prior. I remember that being one of the hottest summers in recent memory, and being brutally exhausted after digging for days in 95-degree weather. It was all worth it though. The fish loved it, and I spent countless hours enjoying it. Until recently, that was actually the most viewed video on my channel as well. I don't care what anyone says about how it looked. The thing functioned like a champ, and I never had any issues with it. And you better believe once the pond guy caught wind of what I was up to, he wanted to be a part of it. That snowballed into a whole slew of things. Aquascape and Tussie Landscaping showed up to my house only weeks later, and helped build a second pond in my front yard. We worked through the rain and had a great time working toward a common goal. Now friends with Greg and Ed, I was invited to Pondemonium the same year, where I did my first build for someone other than myself. However, I had to do it in front of an audience, which was weird at the time, but I made a lot of friends in the process. A few months later, I ended up in Chicago once again for my first Aquashella. I competed in my first scape-off as well in the Oaza Bio-Orb scape-off. Because of that and the event itself, I made so many friends with other creators. I've randomly met some of the Serpa squad in person prior to this, but this was the first time that I really got to carry on full-on conversations with some of you, and it was a great time. I also sparked a huge collaboration with custom aquariums that would happen a few months later. All of this resulted in 2019 being the craziest year up to that point, from the vast amount of different things I got to do as well as projects I made. The year concluded on a strong note with yet another collab, this time with Ants Canada. We challenged each other to make terrariums, which was a lot of fun. Early January of 2020 marked the beginning of interesting times. I finally received the giant paludarium from Custom Aquariums, which was the largest enclosure I've ever owned up to that point. I turned it into an awesome paludarium for various fish later on in the year. It was also around then that I decided it was finally time to risk it all and quit my job. YouTube was becoming fairly consistent, things started to pick up, and I had about 450,000 subscribers. It was a scary decision to make, and so much led up to it. For 3 years straight, I did everything I could to make this dream a reality. I lost a lot of time with people close to me, removed pretty much all leisure from my life, sacrificed my health by getting little to no sleep, and pushed the boundary of what I was capable of. I just couldn't go on like this anymore, and made the jump. At first I was nervous, but I felt a huge sense of freedom. Instead of working 80 hours or more a week, I was able to scale things back a little bit. Truthfully, I was probably still working about 60 hours a week, but I was able to dedicate all of my time to SerpaDesign. However, just as I began getting some breathing room, my joy would soon be challenged along with the rest of the world by the dreaded pepperoni. There was a lot of uncertainty surrounding everything, but I continued working and enjoyed the space I'd been crafting for myself all these years. Being stuck at home gave me time to appreciate everything a little more. I was also able to spend more time with my wife and make up for lost time. World events aside, 2020 no doubt was the year of aquatics. I made a ton of awesome aquariums and paludariums. I also got Suriname toads, which were a dream animal of mine forever. We named them Pancake and Flapjack, and I gotta say these are some of the most incredible animals that I've ever had, and there's just something so special about them. One of my favorite projects to date came to be as well, the Live Edge Terrarium computer desk. Looking back, it's really overbuilt, other than the spindle legs that skipped leg day. Even though I can't enjoy the view, smell rotting plants constantly, have to deal with bugs crawling on me while my arms fall asleep, and tear my shirts, I still use it to this very day and I thoroughly enjoy it. Near the end of the year, I did yet another install. This time it was an Ultim Angel biotope setup for my friend Weston. I met him through the pond build I did in the previous year. He spent time in Peru with Heiko Blair and imagined something like this in his house for years. It was an awesome build that I was happy to do for him and his family, and from what he said, it's still doing great to this day. Moving into 2021, I continued making various fish tanks, dealt with a few issues like the dreaded Dragon Root Aquarium, and even took part in the Pokemon craze of 2021. The unofficial official mascot of the channel, Samson, also made an appearance in a big way. He showed us how he takes care of business at the dinner table. I was also able to finally make a highly requested build, the bioactive bearded dragon vivarium. From what I've been told and seen in snaps of him, Felix is still doing really well and enjoying the vivarium to this very day. I keep trying to get Nate to let me build something bigger for him, but he's not ready for it just yet. Speaking of which, I have to backtrack a little. While at a fish store in 2020, a dude came up to me and asked if I was Tanner from SerpaDesign. He was hyped to see me and I wouldn't see him again until the next time I stopped by. He said he sent me a DM on Instagram and to check it out if I had time. I generally don't check DMs, but he needed help with the paludarium and I obliged. He ended up making a pretty cool setup. We talked a little more and he also wanted advice on how to do a bearded dragon tank. I personally never really wanted to keep one, but I saw the opportunity to finally fulfill the audience request. So we teamed up together and built this vivarium. Once travel restrictions finally lifted a little, I went to yet another Aquashella, this time in Orlando. I got to meet a lot of incredible people in the Serpa squad once more, and made friends with even more creators. Prior to the event, I collabed with Camp Kennan to build a custom vivarium for Bobby Rubino. I befriended him years earlier at Pondemonium, but this allowed me to get to know him better, tour the camp and meet a lot of incredible animals, swim with cichlids, and go mudding in the Florida Pine Glades. Back at SerpaDesign World headquarters, I continued making awesome projects like the Infinity Overflow Aquarium, the Guppy Patio Pond, an ecosystem pond for my parents, the biggest indoor project I've done to date, the 600-gallon vivarium, running waterfalls in a jar, the jumping spider vivarium, and many more. Near the end of the year, I went to another aquashella, but this time to do an installation for myself. It was a lot of fun to build and everyone seemed to enjoy it. However, this was for the first time in 7 years that I truly had help. Traveling, filming, and doing projects on the road is a lot of work. That's where Nate came back into the picture. We had great synergy with Felix's vivarium, and by this point, he was more or less my apprentice. I began teaching him how to film, showed him tricks with scaping, and funny enough, to this day, I'd consider him one of my best friends. There's just something about working together for a common goal that really builds friendships. We also made some patio ponds for the aquascape booth while we stayed at Aqualand prior to the event itself. This year ended on a very strong note. I made the most extensive animal room tour I've done on the channel to date. In fact, it was the last one I've done. Don't worry though, I intend to do another one later this year. Additionally, after 8 years as SerpaDesign and 5 years of consistently grinding to make my dream real, I reached the 1 million subscriber milestone on YouTube. I honestly never thought it would happen, but sure enough it did. I started the New Year's right by putting the play button into a paludarium. I thought that would be a cool way to showcase it and share such a milestone. With the gold play button in my possession, fueled for the year to come, I jumped in with an attitude to conquer. Everything began really strong. I made awesome projects like the micro all-in-one snail aquarium, the fern mountain, and the bog orbs riparium planter. Early on in the year, I was back in Orlando once more for, you guessed it, yet another aquashella. Before the event, we also went back to Camp Kennan, toured Blake's Exotic Animal Ranch, saw Charlie Moorcroft's place, and did a build for Will Nace. This time, it was for venomous snakes. I hadn't done that previously, and it's something you'll never see in my personal collection. The farthest I'll go is probably something like a snapping turtle, which I might add aren't even dangerous if you know what you're doing, but that's beside the point. I bring that up because I ended up getting another snapping turtle shortly after this. Alyssa named her Cookie, and she's one of the late Fred Grunwald's hybrid snapping turtles that was gifted to me by my friend Charlie. He focuses primarily on turtles and has his own conservation initiative for them, the Moorcroft Conservation Foundation. I was really excited to add a turtle to my collection again, but I came to a serious realization. After seeing what my friends down in Florida were up to, it was very apparent how limited I was in my current place. I'm thankful for the house and everything it allowed me to do, but from the very beginning, it was far from optimal. Needless to say, I felt smothered pretty much from the beginning, and I realized what needed to happen. Either I had to put an addition on the house, get a studio place elsewhere, or move. We got quotes to do an addition, but everything that was coming back just wasn't worth it. Plus, it honestly only would have put a band-aid on the situation. So we began looking for a new house as I continued making projects and doing work. And this is when things just kept stacking up against me. Over the span of a few months, we lost 3 loved ones, which wasn't easy as it is, but a lot of bad things began happening in the animal room as well. Mia, my wife's betta, got sick with dropsy, there was an ongoing issue with the Suriname toad tank, and much more. And just when things started looking up again, I almost cut my finger off with a hedge trimmer. I honestly can't believe I didn't because it went all the way to the bone and fractured it, and I had to get the whole thing stitched up. I was thankful it wasn't worse, but it introduced a slew of new issues. First of which, I really couldn't do water changes until the wound closed up. Luckily, Nate came in clutch and helped me with all of that. Otherwise, I'm not sure what I would have done. Even though I wasn't in the best conditions to do work, I also had to keep the channel going. I could no longer use my index finger, and to this day, it's not what it used to be, but the show had to go on. Despite struggling a lot, I actually think a lot of the best projects on the channel came from that time period, including the Crystal Gems Aquarium, the Bamboo Zen Garden, Ancient Ruins Paludarium, and the Floating Waterfalls Terrarium. Regardless, I was honestly burnt out and I had to make a video about it. Even though every YouTuber does it from one point to another, and I do it occasionally, I think it's kinda lame to get drama clicks. Additionally, I do my best to keep my personal life separate from the content. I just want to do what I love while inspiring others in the process and do what I can to add some amount of positive influence to the world. I will admit though, it was helpful to talk about this when I did. Things did eventually begin to improve, starting with my finger healing over. I was able to make content just a little bit easier now. The nearly 6-month search to find the proper home finally paid off as well. We were getting really discouraged because there was nothing available that was even remotely close to what we needed. We were just about ready to give up. However, I woke up one morning and had a knowing in my soul. You're going to get your house today, and I believed it. Sure enough, our realtor called us about a house that fit our specific needs that evening. We saw it the next day, and the rest was history. As all the paperwork was being finalized, I went to Florida for the last time in 2022 for Animal Con USA. I didn't document any of that, but prior to the event, Nate and I pulled up to Charlie's yet again, but this time for a collaboration. We built an incredible DIY bog-filtered pond alongside Greg's Turtle Haven, who I befriended at Pondemonium years prior, and Dan the Turtle Man. Not only did we make an awesome ecosystem for snapping turtles, but we formed an amazing group of friends and made memories that will last a lifetime. As soon as I got back, it was time to close on the new house and get the ball rolling. The house needed a lot of work, and I mean a lot of work. The first order of business, though, was the animal room. My goal initially was to finish it and then move the animals in, but I wanted to sell the old house as soon as possible. So Nate and I moved all of the animals to the new house while I was renovating and building the infrastructure for everything. And unfortunately, many of the projects got ruined in the process, like the 600-gallon vivarium and the 300-gallon paludarium. Sadly, I also had to take apart the DIY pond, leave the ecosystem pond, and our first home behind, but it was for the better. In commemoration of it, I built a few terrariums from things I found around the property, so we always have a little part of it. One of which was a baseball covered in moss that I just so happened to find. Most of the animals made it safely to the new place, and we began settling in, but things weren't normal just yet. I was still working to complete the animal room and was getting close. So much so that I was able to add a setup to the room, which was my first saltwater tank. I did it in collaboration with my friends over at Fritz. I landed the sponsorship with Fritz a few years prior to this. It's cool because I'd been using their products long before I even started the channel. Anyway, starting saltwater was a whole new world for me, literally. The completion of the new animal room marked the start of 2023. Sort of. I still have a ton of work to do on it, but since then, I've been focusing more on projects themselves and big things behind the scenes. Anyway, to finally see a space designed aesthetically and functionally for what I do that I did all myself was a surreal experience to say the least. This is literally a dream that goes far beyond YouTube itself. I put so much into all of this. Blood, sweat, and tears. Literally. That meant I could finally start doing some new stuff. I set up the arid beetle vivarium, the underwater riparium air pockets, redid Samson's tank which sprung a leak during the move, put an aquarium in my bathroom's wall, and most recently, the guppies have finally found their place in the new animal room. Looking back on all of this is kinda weird. I can vividly remember so much of it, and it's crazy to think that it was literally a third of my life. To think that 10 years ago when I started the channel out of my parents' basement with no direction or purpose I'd end up here is mind-blowing. In my wildest dreams, I never would have imagined what I would make, all of the people I'd meet, places I'd go, and things I'd experience simply by following my passion. I've been in a lot of rough patches in my life, dark places full of depression, loneliness, and so on. It was tough when I always felt like no one saw what I saw or believed in what I was capable of. I'm a frail, flawed human just like anyone else, but I knew I was capable of big things beyond myself. I will say that my parents and my wife always and to this day encourage me, which is very helpful. Sometimes all that you need to hear is that you did a good job or that everything's gonna be alright. I say this because it should never be underestimated how the simplest kind acts can have a positive impact on someone's life. You never know what they're truly going through. I have so much I want to share and love to give, and this platform allowed me to do that in some strange way. It also made me more aware of everything I just said. It's funny because looking back at the vivarium I made for the girl who is now my wife, that's exactly what I was trying to show then. I just didn't understand it. I've consistently worked to refine my presentations, brush up on my skills, make the best videos I possibly can, while also remaining authentic to myself. I've made tutorials, vlogs, ASMR videos, and everything in between. I'm always experimenting to push this form of art forward, while the animals and creativity are at the heart of it. When I started SerpaDesign, there weren't many channels doing stuff like this. It's cool to see how I've helped popularize it to some extent, allowing others to do the same through their art. I've been passionate about it for so long, and I love to see more people taking part in nature art as the whole thing is becoming more mainstream. As far as content is concerned, I really only ever had help a few times when Nate filmed on trips, and otherwise I did everything myself. Not for a trophy, but because it's what I believe I should do. I've always felt like this channel is not about me. It's about using my art and abilities to encourage and inspire anyone who it resonates with. I will admit that I'm a bona fide workaholic, but I recognize that it's not sustainable forever. I've uploaded nearly every Saturday since I started taking things seriously in early 2016. I say this because as the scope of projects continue to grow and the videos become more elaborate, I honestly don't know if weekly uploads are the best solution for me much longer. Which honestly makes sense. Things change over time, and this 10-year cycle is just about to end. That cycle will end in just a few days whenever the channel officially has its 10th birthday. Now don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. In fact, I'm more passionate about all of this now than I was even at the start. However, to continue to improve content in a way that provides maximum value for all, I think it'd be best for myself just to take a week off here or there to maintain a healthier work-life balance. That aside, what exactly does the future hold? Although I don't know for sure, what I can say is this. I thank God daily for the opportunity that I've been blessed with, and I don't take any of this lightly. I'll continue to push the boundaries of this art form while educating, entertaining, and inspiring in the process, at least to the best of my ability. I thank you so much for your support over the past 10 years and for all of your kind words. Honestly and humbly, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you so much for being a part of my journey as SerpaDesign.